Well, some of them seem to be confused, he explained, sounding puzzled. They won't move around, and the ones that do move are wandering into things and banging their heads. Some of the others are behaving oddly, too. One was walking backwards this morning. Mr. Dalton was clearly very concerned. I checked the diary, where all visits and operations were written down, and luckily I could go right away. This sounded like a challenge, and I have always relished a challenge. It was one of the reasons I became a vet in the first place. That, and an unswerving love of animals, and a desire to help whenever I could. I felt a thrill of excitement as I wrote the visit in the diary and scribbled my initials alongside. Mr. Dalton, Willow Tree Farm. Very worried. Cows behaving strangely. Visit ASAP. JN. I gathered what I thought I might need and headed out, not sure of what I'd find when I arrived at the farm. The dancing daffodils made me smile as I drove down Mr. Dalton's lane, but I had the nagging feeling that I would be faced with something difficult when I got to inspect his herd. Willow Tree Farm was close to a river. In fact, it was close to two rivers, as they joined forces less than half a mile upstream. One came down from the distant hills to the northwest, the other from the moors to the northeast, and the nutrients they carried made the surrounding pastures rich and fertile. Cattle had grazed the fields next to the farm for generations and had grown fit and strong. But that was not on Mr. Dalton's mind today, as he stood grim-faced outside the cowshed. "Thanks for coming so quickly. They're in here," he said, stooping through a low door into a dark building, which was large but had a stuffy, dusty smell. There was a group of 5 cattle looking very sorry for themselves. Some were standing, staring at a wooden hayrack, which was precariously attached to one of the stone walls. Another was gazing into space, and a couple were lying down. One had its head curled round, resting its nose against its flank, as if fast asleep, and the other was flat on its side with its eyes closed. I had to look carefully to make sure it was still breathing. "So, what happened then, Mr. Dalton?" I asked, trying to work out what on earth was going on. "Well, the herd's been outside for a couple of weeks now," began Mr. Dalton. "It's been dry and sunny, and the grass started growing early this year. It was lush and greener than usual, so I let them all out. It's been a long and hard winter, so they were as pleased to be outdoors as I was. Then, just yesterday, I noticed these few weren't quite right, standing still when the others were walking about. I hadn't a clue what was going on, so last night I brought them in to keep an eye on them and this morning they looked worse. That's why I called you." Some cases are simple to work out, but a group of older cattle with varied and unusual symptoms is a tricky thing to solve. Of course, and rather frustratingly for a vet, animals can't talk, so it's down to the vet to find the answers. Mr. Dalton had set the scene nicely, and already I had a couple of clues with which to work. It was very useful to know that the problems had started outside, shortly after the cattle had been turned out, and that the rest of the herd seemed to be okay. I asked a few more questions before reaching for my equipment and examination gloves. "How long have you had them for?" I asked. "I got them last autumn from the sales. They were a feisty bunch, fresh off the hills in the Scottish borders. They've been fed on turnips and hay all winter, and I wormed them and gave them all their vaccines after they arrived. They've grown well and looked in good shape. I thought they'd thrive on the grass this spring, but not so far." Despite the information Mr. Dalton had given me, I was starting to get almost as confused as the cattle. Since they were showing different signs, I set about examining them one by one, starting with the 2 lying on the straw bedding. First, I took their temperatures with my thermometer. Each one had a normal reading, which wasn't much help. A high temperature usually means there is an infection. A low temperature could signify a condition called milk fever, where the animal's calcium levels decline dangerously. But this is only seen in cows that have just had a calf. Next, I reached for my trusty stethoscope. A vet's